Welcome. We're glad that all of you can join us this afternoon for your virtual visit to Carthage. We wish that we were able to welcome you to campus in person, but until we're able to do so, we're glad you're taking advantage of this virtual event. We have numerous other virtual events available on our website. We encourage you to check out the upcoming events and also the recordings of the previous webinars that we have hosted. My name's Ashley Hansen. I'm the Associate Vice President for Admissions and Financial Aid. Today, we have some of our expert faculty members from the political science, international political economy, and the economics departments at Carthage. They are going to share with you additional information about what their programs offer, how they work with our students, what our students are doing both in and outside of the classroom and life after Carthage. As you have questions, you are welcome to use the chat feature, which is at the bottom of the screen. At the end of the faculty presentations, we will be able to go to have the question and answer session. This presentation is being recorded and will be placed on our website after today's event. So you're welcome to reference back to it or to share with friends and family members as well. We can't wait to have you on campus in person, but until then, please enjoy hearing more from our faculty. Professor Mass, Professor Sear, Professor Kronovich, we're glad to have you here today. Welcome.
So good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of a very large number of people, I'd like to say congratulations on finishing up high school, and you're only a couple months away from getting your college career started. We look forward to helping you all with that. I'm going to start us off. Here we go. I'm going to take a little bit of time and talk about the political science department at Carthage. I'm not going to get into real detail, but I will give you a kind of oversight of the various kinds of educational experiences you'll have in the classroom, and kind of just introduce you to some of the questions that are typical of what you would be grappling with in our department. My slides, there we go. So before we get into the classes, a little bit about what politics is. Political science is the systematic study of politics. There's a lot of different ways to kind of come at the subject of politics. It's kind of conventional to think about politics in a classical sense, as well as a modern one. In the classical realm here in Western civilization, we kind of trace the systematic study of politics to the ancient Greeks, fellows like Socrates depicted there on the screen. And for the Greeks, politics was this activity that was dedicated to the study of virtue and justice, trying to figure out what the good community is, what a good life is. These are kinds of moral questions that still resonate in the political realm today. But in a more modern sense, we've come to think about politics as a kind of struggle for power and how to use power. Professor Harold Lasswell is pictured there. He very famously described politics as who gets what, when, and how. Dr. Lasswell was a longtime professor at Yale University, but he has a regional connection. He was an Illinoisan, born and raised. He did his PhD at the University of Chicago. He's on a very short list of the most famous American political scientists. And then I guess I'd like to point out that the systematic study of politics can be both empirical as well as normative in character. And by normative, what I mean is if empirical study of politics is about trying to figure out politics as it's practiced and how it actually takes place in the world, a normative perspective on politics would be about exploring questions of politics as they should be, right? Asking kind of like, not just what politics is, but what ought it to be. And political science encompasses both veins of inquiry. Our department divides the curriculum up into some subfields. It's very typical for colleges and universities to do this. One subfield is American government and politics, and the kinds of questions you'll be exposed to in these sorts of classes include things like the character of American political institutions and processes, their historical roots, and their kind of evolutionary path over time. Why are political institutions changing? What are some consequences of those changes, and so forth? How has the United States interacted with other states in the world, and why? We can get professors here perhaps to talk a little bit about American foreign policy at some point. He teaches a course in that. We also offer a course in American military conflicts as well. And then with respect to policy kinds of questions, how do public policies emerge? Why do they emerge? When and what conditions do they emerge? And in what form should they take? A number of our courses are also separated into a subfield called public law. Civil rights and civil liberties are kind of essential topics within the field of public law. With respect to civil liberties, how free are we? How free should we be? Is a kind of critical question, and an enduring one that's changed over time. Civil rights, how equal are we before the law? How equal should we be? And you don't have to spend much time looking at news stories in the press to see that these kinds of questions are constantly surfacing all the time, and they are nothing if not enormously relevant to contemporary American political life. And then we also explore the proper balance of power between the branches of government. And again, any kind of cursory examination of current political issues will illustrate the tug and pushing and pulling between the various branches over kind of the lines of authority, the exercise of power, and so forth. And so, be it at the state level, here in Wisconsin, for instance, very recently, the governor had asserted authority to institute certain social distance measures. The legislature pushed back and argued that he did not have, he was exceeding his authority, and the courts, of course, intervened in favor of the legislature. And so these questions of separation of powers and checks and balances, again, like civil liberties and civil rights, enduring and studying the public law will expose students to these kinds of arguments and to the ways in which the courts have viewed these questions and the evolution of the arguments that courts have made about what the answers, what they think the answers to those questions ought to be. Another realm of coursework in political science at Carthage deals with what we might call global politics, and so international relations and comparative politics, another important realm of the discipline, and our students are very fruitfully engaged in those subjects. So questions like how states or countries, in political science we refer to countries as states very often, how do they behave on the international stage, and why, how and why do different types of states produce different kinds of outcomes, and how do states and their politics vary by region? So, you know, many of our students have an international focus. They're very interested in the world, and they're pulled into the study of politics in the Middle East or in Latin America or in Asia, for instance. And these are the sorts of classes that can supplement or drive further those kinds of interests. And then when it comes to political theory is a field that stretches all the way back to the Greeks, at least, in the Western tradition at least. And they're going to be dealing with certain kinds of questions, like what is the nature of citizenship? What does citizenship require of us? What is justice? What is the best form of government? And so the courses at Carthage in this realm are designed to give students an exposure to the kind of the arc thinking as it's evolved over time. In the slide here, we have a bridge on the left. The image in the upper right is, of course, Niccolo Machiavelli, who is in his own way a kind of bridge between classical and modern thinking. Students become conversant in the various ideas of Western political thought. And then I guess in addition to all that, what is the essence of human nature? And how do different answers to the question of what human nature is, how does that shape one's perspective on all those other kinds of questions? And then to just kind of wrap things up, I thought I'd, kind of throw out a couple suggestions as to why one might study political science. You might be interested in public problems and how those public problems might be solved. There's a whole range of public problems out there, as I'm sure you are aware, ranging from climate change to air and water pollution to crime, racism. My colleagues will talk perhaps a bit about economic problems, poverty, inequality, the distribution of opportunity, and so forth. All of these kinds of challenges that societies face are public problems to the extent that we are all kind of vulnerable to the actions of others. And dealing with public problems requires collective action, that is some kind of coordinated effort by individuals to deal with. And if you're interested in collective action requires politics. It occurs at all scales of human existence: local, state, national, and global. Again, there are opportunities for people to engage in all these different scales. You can engage the effort at collective action both in the public sector as well as the private sector. Public service encompassing civil service, working within executive branches, but also in elected office. And in the private sector, perhaps you've heard of the acronym NGOs, that stands for non-governmental organizations. There are a plethora of NGOs out there engaged in the business of trying to promote political objectives and to achieve political objectives in the private nonprofit sector. And then it could be that you're interested in the law and that a career in the legal field as an attorney, as a criminal defense lawyer or a prosecuting attorney, or practicing family law perhaps, or business law. Political science students coming out of Carthage have entered all of those fields over the years. Political science is a good way to expose yourself and prepare yourself for those kinds of careers. And then finally, in a more general sense, studying political science, like studying a number of fields here, I'll throw a bone to all of my colleagues throughout the college. Studying political science, if you do it well, like if you study history well, or sociology well, or chemistry well, or economics well, or international political economy well, it will help you think more clearly, more critically, and improve your communication skills at letting people know important information in the interests of kind of generating collective action. So that's my spiel on the studying of political science at Carthage. I will turn it over, and I'll look forward to questions that you might have on more specific kinds of topics when that time in the program comes. So thanks for listening.
Okay, I think it's my turn. Hi, everybody. I'm Ron Kronovich, economics professor. So I'm so happy that you could make it. Like Ashley said, I'm really sorry that we're not doing this in person, but I look forward to welcoming you to campus soon. So I'm the economics professor. Economics, political science, and international political economy really go nicely together. There's a lot of overlap. We study a lot of the same issues, but from different perspectives, and the fields really complement each other well. And I'm super lucky to be able to work with the two people. I don't know where the little boxes are on your screen, but Professor Mast and Professor Sear are just so fantastic. And I've learned so much from each of them and from my other colleagues by working with them over the past number of years. So I also have some PowerPoint slides. I'm going to see if I can share my screen. Just give me a minute to do that.
There you go.
All right, fantastic. So let me talk a little bit about the kinds of things that economics majors learn about. Almost everything that happens in the world has something to do with the economy. So lots and lots of things that you read about in the headlines, shocks to the economy, like the effects of global pandemic. In my macro class this last spring, we spent a lot of time learning about the economic impact of the coronavirus on industries, on the job market, on government policy, the government budget, and things like that. So that really made for some very lively conversations. So government has a number of tools available to impact economic outcomes, tools like taxation, both at the aggregate level, how much taxes the government takes out, and maybe using tax cuts to possibly stimulate the economy, government spending programs at the micro level, the way the government taxes different kinds of activities or goods to sort of alter incentives and to encourage businesses to put resources into one area or another, things like that. Labor markets, things that impact wages and jobs. We have a really cool course on labor economics, and I teach a pretty neat course on the economics of income inequality, why it is that some people earn a lot more money than others. Turns out that the degree of impact inequality has a huge effect on so many different outcomes, things that you might not expect would be related to income inequality. But for example, the prevalence of mental illness, obesity, teen pregnancy, incarceration, environmental issues, and many, many more are all related to the degree of income inequality. And this is kind of a big deal because income inequality has gotten really, really high in the United States and some other countries. So this is a really topical area, and people in all different majors like to learn about this stuff. So I am blessed with lots of different kinds of students in this class. So those are just a couple of examples. Down at the bottom of my slide, I list just a few of the other areas that econ majors learn about. After sort of a set of core courses, students are welcome to sort of branch off into any sort of specialties that they're interested in learning about. We really have a lot of options. And the various economics professors have a wide range of expertise. So almost anything that you're interested in learning about, you can find one or two or three of us that can give you a lot of support. So we offer a number of different classes. We offer a lot of different kinds of experiential learning. One big highlight of our program is meaningful one-on-one research with a professor. So this happens in the senior year when students write their senior thesis. This is kind of a big deal research project that's sort of a capstone experience, draws on lots of different things students have learned. And students usually pick a topic that they're really interested in, something that they've maybe learned about in one of their other courses, and they want to spend more time doing original research. So they'll work with one or two of the faculty members individually on the project, and students really produce pretty amazing stuff in these projects. Carthage also offers funding for students to do summer research projects. So students get paid to work on a research project with a professor, and so that becomes their job. So instead of working at a regular job, you could work on your research and make money doing that, and have a really good experience. Students that do those programs really produce some pretty incredible research at the end that helps them in the job market, or becomes a work product that they can use, a sample of their work that they can use when applying to graduate programs and things like that. We take our students to a number of different exciting places in the Milwaukee to Chicago corridor, the Chicago Federal Reserve, the Chicago Board of Options Exchange, and other institutions in Chicago have had Carthage students, econ majors, and other majors. Professor Mast and I took some of our students a couple of years ago to an energy-related think tank at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, talked to an expert there. We were teaching a course on energy type issues, political science and economics and environmental stuff. And that's a really fun course. The Fed challenge. So the Federal Reserve System, which sets monetary policy, oversees the banking system, manipulates interest rates in the short term to try to help the economy grow smoothly. The Federal Reserve has a program called the Fed Challenge for high school students and college students. Teams of students work on a presentation to actual senior economists at the Federal Reserve in which they put themselves in the position of the top people running the Federal Reserve. And they argue for economic policy, and they back up their arguments with all kinds of data and their own analysis. And it's really a pretty great experience. It's a way to apply what you're learning in economics to the real world. So that's been a fantastic experience for our students. We do lots of interdisciplinary courses. We take our students on trips. In our J-term program, we've offered some pretty fun trips to different places. There was a J-term trip a couple of years ago on Brexit. So students went to London with a couple of our professors and learned about Brexit from the people that were sort of making it happen. There have been other pretty neat trips to different parts of the world or parts of the country on different things related to economics and society. So there are a lot of different, these are just a few, but I can't leave off small classes. So the neat thing about Carthage, this is not just for economics, but for all majors. After you get out of the intro level classes, the classes are pretty much all small, and the professors get to know every single student by face and by name. And that's really great for us because we can support your learning a lot better when we have, 8 or 10 or 15 of you than if we would have 40 or 60 or 80 like at some big universities. So that's really important, and that contributes a lot to the Carthage experience. Here are a few things that our recent graduates are doing. They're going to graduate schools, a lot of really excellent graduate schools around the country and in the region. We've got a couple of students who are working at the Federal Reserve System. One is an intern, another one is employed there, Chicago and also Washington, D.C. Council of Economic Advisors to the President of the United States. So at least 2 of our students have worked or are working in the Council of Economic Advisors for the last few administrations, going back, I think, to George W. Bush. Before that is before I came to Carthage, so I'm not sure about that. And then different kinds of organizations, companies, government agencies, and not-for-profit. So you might have noticed a pattern in the different things here that that Carthage econ majors are doing. And the pattern is that there's no pattern. And that's because a Carthage economics degree doesn't box you into a very narrow career path. It gives you tools that you can use throughout a range of different career paths. Of course, that's true for other fields like political science and history and art and music and English literature and things like that. You really should major in the thing that you love, even if it's not economics, but hopefully it'll be economics or political science. Because no matter what you major in, you're gonna learn how to think, how to write well, how to work well with others, how to communicate clearly in different ways, speaking and writing and so forth. All of these skills are highly in demand and highly rewarded by the job market, and you'll get them no matter what you study at Carthage, but study econ or political science or international political economy. Okay, so a lot of our students go on to law school, not a majority, but economics really is good preparation for law school. And that's because the kinds of things that you learn in economics really sort of develop your analytical abilities. And these are the variabilities that are tested on the LSAT. So the LSAT is like the entry exam for law school. So this is one of several studies that I've seen on LSAT scores by undergraduate major. Econ is always sort of kind of near the top, like in the top 20% of the majors. So this one is from 2018. the scores range from 149.5 at the bottom to 162.8 at the top. And econ is pretty close to the top at number 6 out of 45 different majors that were ranked. So I don't know if this is bordering on crass or if it's just practical. I have some different data on salaries by field of undergraduate major. Now, really not by field of career, because what you major in really is not super highly correlated with what you'll end up doing. I mean, I showed you on the earlier slide how econ majors are doing all different kinds of things. But econ majors tend to do well. So I couldn't figure out how to switch over to the internet. So I just did a screen grab and pasted it into my PowerPoint. So econ is sort of near the top of salaries, behind the engineering fields, of course, and up here with physics and computer science. And there's really a range, and most of these fields are doing pretty well. I mean, almost anything that you major in, you're going to be okay. Somebody with a bachelor's degree earns, on average, $1.5 million more over the course of their lifetime than somebody without a bachelor's degree. But if this is something that you want to know about, maybe you care about this. Econ is one of the higher ranking fields in terms of salary. All right, so that's it. I'm going to turn it over to Professor Sear, Director of the International Political Economy Program, a really excellent program at Carthage College. And then I'm going to hang around and we'll all be available in case you have questions at the end. Professor Sear?
Thank you, Ron. I want to echo Professor Mast and Professor Kranovich by underscoring how much we appreciate you considering Carthage College among the many different choices that you and your parents have. And we want to thank you for taking time to be with us. It's a challenging time in some ways, but also one important fact to keep in mind is thanks to technology, we have literally communications everywhere. Once upon a time, you had to have a telephone that you didn't carry in your pocket, but that sat on a mantelpiece at home and was rather large and connected with a wire to the wall, or you had to have a television set that was a very big piece of furniture with a very small screen. An older person like me can remember those ancient times, also connected by various wires to the wall and an antenna on the roof. What I thought I'd do, you're listening to very intelligent professors who like to talk and are good at it, providing a huge amount of information. College is challenging, and it's already challenging for those of you who are trying to absorb all these different points of view from all these talkative men and women that have the opportunity to talk to you. What I thought I'd do is not present slides, but just talk a bit informally. What is international political economy? I've had people who are quite knowledgeable in other parts of the academic world ask exactly the same question. The short, straight answer is it's where political science and economics began. I mentioned technology, something called the Industrial Revolution, which began at the end of the 1600s. In Britain, where an awful lot of technology and a lot of inventions are made even today. The British lead the world in important ways in inventing things of all kinds, including important ideas. At the end of the 1600s, something called the steam engine was invented, which evolved into a steam-powered locomotive that I'm sure you may have seen, probably standing still, but certainly seen photographs, pictures, old film and video of these big noisy machines moving huge amounts of goods and a lot of people around the landscape. Nowadays, they tend to be much quieter, diesel or more and more electrically driven. The steam engine created all kinds of new economic activity. And our British friends decided we really need to study this in detail. It's affecting our politics. Just before they invented the steam engine, the British went through a bloody civil war. I mean, really bloody, back in the 1600s, when it was a very different country than today. 1776, that probably rings a bell. The American Revolution began, sparked by ideas that are from Britain, and by lots of technology that helped the Americans feel much more independent from their home British Isles, and lots of ideas. In 1776, the American Revolution began. 1776 as well, a very famous political economist. You've heard a lot of names this afternoon. One more is Adam Smith, who really, in a brilliant and insightful and very clear way, described what was happening in the Industrial Revolution. Early in the 20th century, the Americans decided in the economics profession, we are so smart, we're so disciplined, we know how to not only analyze technology, but use statistics in a way that means we're really a distinctive profession. We will separate ourselves and become a different occupation, which is certainly justifiable and understandable. Our British friends, and I'll stop the history lesson soon, our British friends have always kept the two together. At the end of the 1960s and into the 1970s, our country had a lot of problems. We had very high unemployment and high inflation going on at the same time. And a lot of economists, especially in the academic world, had predicted that that would not happen. It's always dangerous to predict what human beings are actually going to do. We also had a very frustrating and very, very costly war going on in Southeast Asia, the Vietnam War, which seemed to have no end. And a lot of people from academia, with 20/20 hindsight, had been involved in that. So there was a movement in this country to get economics and political science back together again. And I've been fortunate to learn a lot about economics. I'm in the political science department, and learn a lot about not just the history I've been describing, but how things are unfolding in the future, because this interdisciplinary major looks at the dynamics, the relationships, the changes between these two fields. And because we live in a complicated world, but also because the Americans have a tremendous capacity to innovate and change in every aspect of life, mostly for the better. You've probably seen this freedom and equality, the best of our country, even in your young lives. I've been very privileged to learn about how these two dimensions relate to one another. Political economy is not a department like economics and political science, it's a program. I tend to be an older relic in my outlook from the Cold War, which ended before you guys were born, or just about that time. But I've therefore been privileged not only to be around younger people and to teach on a full-time basis, but also to learn more about how politics and economics come together. And that's the way the world is changing. To echo what Professor Kranovich and also Professor Mass said, but Ron Kranovich with perfect timing, his concluding remarks were very much what I wanted to emphasize in my story to you. Study what you're most interested in. What you're really interested in is what will carry you the farthest, eventually make the most money, believe it or not, and will lead to the most satisfying life. So we're here to tell you about our departments and the program that I'm involved in. But we're not here to, sell you a car or really sell you a discipline. We're here to sell Carthage College and to urge you to consider what is most interesting to you. Most of you probably don't know that at this point, but that's why college is here. It's challenging and it's difficult, but it's also very supportive. One important point, since making a living is important, and a lot of people nowadays focus on business, which I think is all to the good. Institutions in this country especially, also in Britain, not so much in some other countries, but people who actually run big corporations, big nonprofits, educational institutions, government agencies and offices, they tend to a remarkable degree to be liberal arts graduates. We have a Clausen Center that's named for Tom Clausen, a graduate from a long time ago, even from my point of view, who ran Bank of America, the giant commercial bank, and something called the World Bank, one of three big economic arms of the United Nations. He majored in mathematics at Carthage, but he also majored in philosophy. He was convinced at a young age, and he happened to be right, not for the first or last time, that a liberal arts background was the best kind of preparation for a career in banking that he wanted to go into, or most other kinds of work. that's one point to keep in mind. Our students and graduates, a number of them have done very well. Ron mentioned the Council of Economic Advisors and the Federal Reserve Board. Jackson Bailey, who majored in finance and IPE, graduated just a year ago, is now working for the Council of Economic Advisors in Washington, a pivotal agency, and right at the center of economic policy made by our federal government at the top. John Gray, who graduated more like a decade ago and also chose to go into public service, is currently Associate Director of the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, which you may not have heard of, and a lot of adults haven't either, but the Office of Management and Budget, previously the Budget Bureau, they actually define with the president and his immediate staff, or his or her immediate staff, I'm sure will be true soon, and others, the federal budget, and then they run it. It's one of the most powerful bodies in the federal government and one of the least visible. Jan Fournier, who graduated again a little while ago, is now a rising executive at Uline, the huge packaging and shipping company, not too far away from campus and not too far from the big Amazon distribution center. IPE majors go into business, go into government, in the nonprofit world. And increasingly for people your age, in contrast to people my age and older, Americans especially move around among nonprofit, government, and business entities. So these are ideas that I hope you'll keep in mind. We're not here to sell you anything except the value of our fine college and the importance of a college education. I hope you'll get in touch with me. I'm not showing you a lot of slides, but one email I'd like you to remember is ACYR, Alpha Charlie Yankee Romeo in the phonetic alphabet, for arts here at carthage.edu. Since I had my first job interview when I was even younger than you guys, because my father insisted on it, I thought of the great question I should have asked as I was walking down Western Avenue in Los Angeles after the interview. And it hasn't changed a bit, even at my age, after the important meeting or job interview or whatever. I still think of what I should have said after the meeting. So I'm sure there are things I should have asked. I hope I prompted some questions among you fine young people, and I hope beyond the discussion today, you'll feel free to send me an email. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for all that wonderful information. For those of you who are watching, you are welcome to use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. And there's also the Q&A section as well. But to get us started, for a student who may be undecided, how would you advise them if they have an interest in the three areas that you've talked about today, to help them figure out what they want to do?
Well, take a class, an introductory class in the field. I'll let my two eloquent colleagues carry on from there. But look at what's interesting to you.
Don't be afraid to sign up for a class for any other reason than, it just seems interesting. You can jump into a degree in IPE or economics or political science. You don't have to figure that out your first year, right? You can spend a year marinating in a variety of different kinds of classes, and then gravitate towards one of our three fields, and still have plenty of time to graduate in 4 years. So, take classes, experiment in that regard.
So I would like to add also, so that's the first best advice. The second best advice is to just pop into a professor's office. We all have our doors open. We love it when students come by. When you visit me in my office, you're actually saving me money, because if you weren't, I'd probably be buying a bunch of stuff on Amazon that I don't really need. So please come visit me, and I'd love to talk to you about econ or related subjects. And most of my colleagues feel exactly the same. Our doors are open. You can just pop in. You can chat with us about our field or other fields or your interests. And that's a good thing to do too, while you're sort of exploring different options. I can tell you that I switched majors like 5 times as a college student. And I was super happy when I settled on economics. But there are a lot of other ones that if I had unlimited time, I would probably major in 10 different things, because there's so many interesting things out there, you know. So it is tough to narrow it down, and you do have to narrow it down to one or two. But as long as you're happy, you know, that really is the main thing, because everything else will come from that.
Talk to professors, no question, right? We're in this field because we like to talk to students. Professor Sear is encouraging you all to send him an email. That's an invitation that Ron and I also would be happy to extend.
Thank you. So during the past, 8 to 10 weeks, how were you working remotely with your students?
Well, I'll go first. What I didn't do is much of this. I made a judgment right away when the college decided that we were going online, that students would have a lot of video interaction with faculty. And so I chose to not do that. I don't regret that choice, although I think that should this opportunity arise, I will incorporate some video interaction like this moving forward. But what I did do is interact with my students via our course websites, a lot of chats, a lot of kind of written commentary on their written work. And so I gave a lot of feedback on the writing that I expected my students to do in response to the various reading assignments or video assignments that I gave them.
So I didn't hold a class session where everybody would like Zoom in at the same time at a regular time, because I knew quite a few of my students, their lives were sort of changed. Like some of them had to take jobs. Some of them had just different kinds of commitments or different kinds of challenges, some of which I couldn't imagine, and I certainly couldn't observe. So I just felt it would be tough for a number of the students to meet with the whole class for like a big Zoom fest at the same time. So what I did was I made short lectures on video of very focused topics, like 5-minute lectures on different topics. I created sort of multimedia lessons that had videos, links to resources at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. When unemployment started shooting up about a month or so ago, students could sort of monitor that in real time and plug that data into the economic models we were learning to see what that would mean for gross domestic product and consumer spending and all these other things that they were learning about in their textbook. Discussion boards. So our learning management system has a discussion board feature where students or the professor can enter discussion items and students can interact that way. While I didn't have a Zoom class, I did tons of one-on-one video calls. So one of my students, who was so great during the regular semester, was really struggling when we went to online. And we talked about it, and she said it was because she, with a class on campus, that sort of imposed some structure in her life. Like she had to be in this classroom at this time, and that classroom at that time. And without the structure, plus with the craziness of her house, all of her brothers and sisters and her parents were there, and it was just hard to find quiet spaces. So she was having trouble like carving out chunks of time. So what we've tried to do, and this ended up working pretty well, was she and I just would have a standing video call like every 2 to 3 days. And we would go over some material. I would give her some practice problems. She would work them out. I could, correct her in real time if she wasn't getting something right, or if she was, that was great. And then we could move on to other things. So it was just different because every student was in a different situation. So I just had to see what would work better for these students, which isn't the same as what would work well for these other students. So I kind of had to make it up as I went, plus I've never done online teaching before. It was all pretty new to all of us. So, but Hopefully we won't have to do that in the fall, but just no matter what, we have the summer to, to sort of get up to speed on the best practices in online teaching, just in the event that has to be part of the learning experience in the fall. But we're really hoping for back in person on campus.
Thank you.
I tend to have smaller classes, and a main focus for me was the senior thesis in political economy, which is an intensive, in-depth, long essay comparable to what's done in economics and political science. And we tend to have some frequency economics majors in IPE as well, and regularly political science majors, including this last spring. I decided in my circumstances it would be good to stick with our regular structured schedule. And we did, but I certainly learned more about Zoom and especially Google Meet, starting from a pretty low base of expertise, and became pretty good at it. I also became better at using PowerPoint, where I've been vexed by the fact that I should be using it more in class. This public health problem is challenging, but Americans also love technology. And the more you folks travel to other countries, and you will as undergraduates, it's an incredibly integrated world in human terms. And young people like you make a vital difference. You'll see just how high tech we are in this country. So my guess is this public health problem is fading already, but the Americans especially will continue to use technology in the classroom more than before, including stodgy old professors like me.
Thank you. One question is that a student just asked privately is, what type of internships can students complete, and when do they normally do that over their 4 years?
There's no set time. Internships are, I would say, usually taken after the first couple of years. Junior year is a good time to do it. In political science, a couple students more recently have done internships that were parlayed into jobs. One with Johnson Bank, young man graduated a couple years ago. I wrote his thesis with me. He's working for Johnson Bank in Racine. Another with Johnson Controls. She did an internship last summer that has parlayed into a long-term professional position in human resources. We've had students in the public prosecutor's office doing internships with the governor's office up in Madison. And like I said, no specific required time to do that, but usually by your second or third year, keeping an eye out for opportunities is a good idea.
So I would add that Carthage has a new Aspire Center coming online that is going to integrate various kinds of internship experiences into the Carthage curriculum and make them available for all students. So we've got like some top people that are working on that. They have connections with different kinds of private sector, government, and nonprofit organizations in between Milwaukee and Chicago and Madison. And they're going to be placing students into all different kinds of internships depending on the students' interests, the field that they're studying, and what they might want to do after Carthage. So I think we're going to see more and more of that because it's going to be a systematic part of the education.
Yeah, the institution's really made it a priority.
Yep.
Yeah, the Aspire Center is important. It's very well endowed, and it's been a priority of the college now for a while, and you can see it's steadily growing. Both Jerry and Ron make the point in different ways about how an internship can get your foot in the door. And in my time at Carthage, I've now been around for a while, I've seen it just sort of naturally growing steadily. We have some very successful student service organizations connected with our Clausen Center mock trial, which is very helpful for anyone, not just those who are interested in law school, in terms of effective public presentation in a highly competitive environment. Model United Nations, which has been shepherded by Jeff Roberg, a good colleague of ours in political science, very successfully. And ACTUS is a student service organization where I've been more directly involved for a fairly long period of time. Jacqueline Wilkes is the latest in a successful president of that very successful student-led group. She had an internship at SC Johnson, the home care products that you've probably all heard of or seen at some level, even if you haven't thought about it. One of the biggest privately owned companies in the world, right next door in Racine. She had a very good internship that turned into a very attractive full-time job that she's moving on to after her graduation over the weekend. And as our comments, as I hope reveal, we're very much integrated in this process. It's one of the strengths of a small college as opposed to a very different environment of a large, much more structured university.
Wonderful.
Questions? Good questions.
The conversation here. There's a lot of important information that you have shared, and these areas are just so important as we look at the world around us right now, and so relevant. What would each of you say, what makes your program and your department unique in comparison to other institutions of higher learning?
Well, I'm going to speculate a little bit because I've been involved in a handful of universities, but only a handful. One thing that I really am proud of with respect to the political science department at Carthage is the enormous effort that the faculty in the department make towards the senior thesis experience. Both Art and Ron have mentioned it in their comments. I haven't, but so this isn't unique to the political science department. My colleagues also could and did rightly brag about it. But the senior thesis, all of our students are required to write one. These are papers that range from 25 to 45 pages in length. They incorporate 2-3 dozen scholarly sources into the context of the arguments that they make. Students spend 2 semesters dedicated to working it out, a junior spring semester course, getting them ready, and then the senior fall semester of their senior year, they write it. And there's nothing comparable to it with respect to the depth of attention that students are required to dedicate it to it. And invariably, at the end, students and us are proud of the products that they put forward. And Carthage calls this the capstone experience. That's a kind of a higher education buzzword. And sometimes I think the capstone is kind of nominal. But in these 3 programs, the capstone is really, literally a meaningful capstone.
I guess I would second everything that Jerry said about the senior thesis. It really is a pretty fantastic experience, a really broad experience, brings together a lot of things that students have learned and develops really useful skills in the job market or graduate school, skills such as learning how to evaluate the quality of massive amounts of information on the internet, right? It's so important to be able to distinguish between high quality information, kind of so-so, and also poor quality information that's masquerading as something maybe better than it really is. That's really important. Learning how to synthesize different kinds of information, learning to have original thoughts, like to come up with meaningful research questions and how to pursue them, and how to put together a presentation in writing, to deliver orally, to deliver to a small audience or a large audience. All of these skills are super portable across different kinds of career paths. So we think they're really valuable, and that's something that I and most of my colleagues are really, really proud of, because I think we've had some pretty good success with that. Of course, the students, really deserve most of the credit. They've been really fantastic. I would say in terms of distinguishing things, learning experiences at Carthage, we have a sort of a very rich array of learning experiences and the development of skills that really cut across all different kinds of career paths. So I think those things are sort of hallmark, plus being on Lake Michigan. I mean, the lake is so beautiful and amazing. So we're right up against the lake. So those are the things that I think really make a Carthage education distinctive.
Yeah, Ashley really opened the door to being expansive when she said what makes your program unique. I could talk even longer, but I don't really want to about me, myself, and I. As my two colleagues indicated, without being so specific, there is a strong sense of community at the college, and there is a strong collective emphasis on effective presentation and effective writing. I've been fortunate to stay employed and, from my point of view, have interesting jobs, not all of them enjoyable, from a young age. I spent 20 years at the Chicago Council on Foreign Relations, and then working with the president there and others to build it up, and then 2 years in a challenging but ultimately successful turnaround of the World Trade Center in Chicago, which was in some trouble. I had never previously dealt with big business crowd. Of necessity, that was an important source of program income for us. I dealt a lot with corporate executives. And one thing that struck me about these men and women is they all wrote extremely clearly, very clearly, and expressed themselves clearly. And it really brought home to me that above a certain level in a challenging organization, in the business world especially, but also in government and public service, if you're not writing clearly, you're not thinking as clearly as you think you are. And that important skill and ability is one thing that the college really emphasizes. I was an undergraduate at UCLA many years ago where I got a fine education, and then I went to graduate school at another big institution. You really had to assert yourself. With all the other challenges you have at your age, you really have to grab a hold of yourself and get to know a professor at a place like that. And I met very fine men and women, but you really had to make yourself go see them in their office or after class if you were lucky. And the college is a very nice contrast for me because we really are supportive. But the main point, without talking even longer and longer, is clarity. Clarity, the ability to express yourself clearly, you're thinking clearly, and therefore you're going to be effective, even in a tough corporate working environment.
Can I jump in? So one of the student attendees, Tyler, asked a really good question that I think other people might be interested in hearing about, and that's about double majors. Would an international political economy and political science double major have to write 2 senior theses? That sounds like a pretty good
No.
question.
Yeah, the IP is a program, it's not a department, and I defer to department chairs. We have a number of econ majors. We regularly have poli-sci majors, and what we do is work things out. So it's essentially one thesis, usually with some variation. We have modern languages students. We've had business students, especially in finance. And then if it's fine with the department, it's fine with me. And we work it out. We're not only nice people, we're reasonable people at Carthage.
Certainly, there wouldn't be any problems.
Faculty.
There wouldn't be any problems between political science and IPE. That's for sure.
Wonderful. Thank you. For any of our students who are watching this afternoon, if you would like to meet individually, or have a phone conversation with these faculty members, they would be more than happy if you think of questions later on. But again, this recording will be available on our website here later this week, along with the faculty members' contact information as well. But we thank you for joining us and learning more about the programs, and we look forward to having you on campus soon.
Take care, everybody.